Hi, it's Kathy at Art Zone, and I'm going to do our swirl circle tree with you today. This is a monochromatic painting. You'll notice that it is one color mixed with white and black to create tints and shades throughout this entire painting. So we have sent you a stencil. You'll notice our stencil for the tree is actually different than this particular tree on this canvas because this was hand drawn and then painted in. So you may do that. You can draw your own tree and add the circles on, completely your choice. But here we go. I'm gonna put this right up here so we can see it as we're working. We are gonna start on the background behind it. I told you this was a monochromatic painting, meaning we're just going to use one color and mix it with white and black. In my paint palette here, I have, and it's really hard to show you because this one's so full it wants to spill, but I've got 3 wells of white. This white is completely full in the well. This other one is half full, and then right down here is just a little drop of white. Then on this side, it's a little different because black. Black is a very strong color. You do not need a lot of black for it to take over. So I've done a very small drop of black, and then I just doubled it here, but I suspect this might actually be too much for what we're going to be doing. We're using apple barrel paint. It is a thinner paint, which does mean we will need to do 2 coats on the background as we work today. But you can find this paint at any of your local craft stores. I'm gonna take it, including Walmart. The first thing I'm gonna do is to top all 5 of those wells off with my blue. Just gonna get them all completely full. Now there was one well that was already completely full of white, so I'm just gonna put 1 drop of blue in there. I might have to add just a little bit more. And I'm also going to put a whole nother thing of blue by itself. I'm gonna go ahead and give myself 2 of them. We will need black. I'm gonna put some in the center. I'm going to take a small paintbrush. We're not going to use the bristles or the hairs in the beginning. Instead, we're going to use the back of the paintbrush to mix up our colors. I'm going to start with the well that had almost all white with a little dot of the blue, and I'm going to mix it up. Make sure that you really get your paintbrush down into the bottom of that well. You get all of it mixed up. Right now, we are mixing white into our color. When you mix white into a color, it's called tinting. So I have moved on to my next well of white and blue. I did not clean off my paintbrush. You don't need to, it is okay. It should be getting a little more saturated in the blue as you work your way down, since there is less white in each of them. Really make sure you're digging to the bottom of that well. Get all that white to mix in. Now, before I go mix my black, I will wipe off the end of my paintbrush. And let's see here. If it turns completely black, that's fine. We'll try again in the well next to it, but that one's mixing, and I can still tell that there's some blue there, so that's good. This one, on the other hand, might turn all the way. Well, it's doing a nice dark, but not completely black, more of a gray. That's gonna work. So we're gonna start by painting the background. You'll notice that the background of this painting doesn't have a ground. It really is just the blues throughout the background randomly, mostly the dark blues. I'm going to take my big paintbrush, make sure I get a lot on. I'm going to use mostly my dark blues, and then sometimes I'll use my regular blue. I'm going to stay away from the lights because I want the lights to really pop in the circles against the dark background. So I'll take it, get some on there. When you are painting on a canvas, I'm actually painting on paper right now since I already have a canvas version. When you are painting on canvas, you'll notice that there are edges to your canvas right here. There's edge. I would wrap my paint around those edges. I think it just kind of finishes it off. It's really your choice, artist choice there. Really make sure you're taking that paintbrush, big strokes all the way back and forth, completely off of your canvas before you stop. I'm not going to clean my brush. I will switch to the other dark blue, and I'll even work my way back into the other blue, but I don't want to completely cover it up. And then sometimes I'll go back to my light blue, and I'm going to work back and forth. I'll go to my regular, bring it into it. It's all about not over blending. We're trying to leave some areas that are light, some areas that are dark. We will get some of the light, but not yet. I'm going to stay with the darks. I don't want it to be stripy. That's why you see me working back into it and trying to let it blend off without looking like I stopped in the middle of the canvas. You don't want to be shy with your paint. Use a lot of paint in this. Your canvas has a lot of texture that you're going to be trying to cover up with your paint. If I go too fast, please feel free to stop the video. But really fill that canvas up, get all of your edges, and then you're going to want to let it dry. Let it dry anywhere 5 to 10 minutes to where that shine is gone, so you know that it is dry. You can use a hairdryer. When using a hairdryer, don't turn it high. If you can turn it cold, that's better. The problem with drying it too fast is the top of the paint, being acrylic, the top will dry and the bottom is not, and that's going to cause the paint to actually crack. So you want to dry slowly. So if you can, just take a break, put your paintbrush in some water, come back to it in about 10-15 minutes. It'll do a real nice second coat. When you do your second coat, don't worry about matching what you've already done. Start again. Start with those darks, start at the top, work your way down, randomly go between your darkest to your not as dark, and then also getting some of your regular color in there. So those 3 colors will do really well. I have already painted one and let it dry, so I'm going to put that one up and continue on. And we're going to be ready for your stencil. If you just completed your second coat, you need to let it dry. You don't want your stencil on top of wet paint. It will smear your paint and possibly take it right back off. Here, my stencil, I have rolled up little pieces of tape on the back of some of its little parts so that it will stay down. This particular painting, they took their tree trunk all the way down to the bottom. My painting today with this stencil, I'm just going to float the tree in the middle. Completely your choice. So you don't want to put a stencil on top of wet paint. You also don't want to let your stencil dry. Once you start painting, you don't want to let it dry onto your canvas because that will cause your stencil to tear into pieces as you try and lift it up. Let's see where some of that tape is and isn't. I used stencils. You see this one's been used quite a few times. So I'm gonna have to really hold it down as I'm working. There we go. I'm gonna take my smaller dauber. I'm gonna touch my black, but before I actually start using it, I'm gonna take that dauber into an empty well and I'm gonna dab it around a bit. I'm trying to spread the paint out. I don't want it globbed up on that dauber because then it's going to push the paint underneath our stencil. But you're gonna wanna go slow. Hold your stencil down, slowly dab it up and down. Don't rub it. It's not a paintbrush. We're not smearing back and forth. Really get into all those little spots. Don't worry about the texture that's being created. As the paint dries, that texture will go away too. And if it doesn't completely go away, you could always take a paintbrush over it and smear it out some. It's nice to take this painting slow, take breaks. Make sure you're not pushing too hard. Anytime you clean the dauber out with water, you need to really get it dry before you continue using it. Otherwise, that water is going to cause your paint to smear all over that canvas. Really watch the edges of your stencil as you're using it. There we are. You do have to watch the paint to make sure it's not drying on your dauber when you're going in between layers. But at this point, you are ready to slowly peel up all the little spots that you've taped down. And let's take this stencil off. Now, if there's been any areas where the paint's gone underneath the stencil and you're not completely happy with it, you can always take a small paintbrush and fix those areas, fill them in, clean them up, give it a crisper line. Everyone kind of has their own ideas on how it should look. I do warn you that when I start doing this, it seems to just go on forever because I always want to crisp up my lines and my edges. And I could spend a lot of time fixing things when I should just let it be. Sometimes when you just let it be, it really works out. Okay, I am gonna move on to my next part. We are ready. We're ready to add all of our circles. This part can be a little challenging because you look at how many circles are on this one, and so then you dive in and you start adding all these circles. But you have to remember, there's different sizes. So you don't want to add all big circles before we add some of our other sizes. Take it slow. You'll also notice the circles are different color combinations. Some start dark, some start light. Really look at your background to decide where a light circle should start or a dark circle. And then there's these little bitty circles that will happen that will cause your eye to travel and kind of spin around and makes the swirly tree. A little bit of movement in your art due to some repetition and rhythm there. All right, I'm gonna start with this big dauber. Ideally, you would wait for your tree to be dry. You guys have time, you can wait. I'm gonna take it, I'm not gonna put it all the way down into my paint once again. I'm gonna touch the top of it and then I'm gonna find something to kind of daub around on. If you have your stencil and there's a clean spot on it, you could daub around on it for a little bit just to get that paint a little more even onto your dauber. We don't want to press down hard. This is the challenging part. Decide where to start. I take it, I press it, and release. Once again, it's going to do that texture. It's okay. Most of the time the texture goes away. If not, we'll use a paintbrush and we'll fill it in. I'm only going to do about 2 in this color. I'm going to try and just wipe my dauber off at this point. Go to my next darkest. I don't have to add a big circle for every tint and shade. Sometimes the circles will touch the tree, sometimes they won't. I don't want to make it too even. I'm gonna go ahead and do, no, these guys are so big. I'm gonna move on to the next one. I'm gonna wipe this off. I'm gonna go straight on to a regular. I'm just gonna do one of him. This one's got a little bit of that color from before still on it. Doesn't hurt anything. Up here it looks like the texture kind of missed spots. Once again, we can take our small paintbrush and fill it in. If you don't have a small paintbrush, you could take a Q-tip and fill these in if needed, if you see spots that didn't get all the way in. And I think I'm gonna add a dark circle or 2. I'm gonna go straight to my darkest. Looks like I'm gonna have to make some more dark. Didn't quite make enough. This is where it's challenging not to make too dark. Remember, we made that by mixing using the back of our paintbrush handle. down into that well. Get it all to mix up. I'm gonna add a little more black to this one. Okay, back to my big dots. I'm gonna dab around. I think I'm gonna stop with the big. And now I'm actually going to flip it over and use the back. This one's a little tricky because the paint sits on this wooden handle, and sometimes you just have way too much and you don't realize it, and then it creates a big blob. So you really do have to watch what you're doing and dab somewhere else first to kind of get an idea of what you have. It's kind of hard to know where to stop with this painting. I'll wipe it off. I'm gonna add some of the lighter. Try and space them out. Maybe just one more. There we go. So from here, this is your first layer of the dots. You need it to dry. If there's any fixing of them, you still need it to dry. Then fix it with your paintbrush, let it dry, and then we're ready to start adding our layers inside of each circle. So I do have one that is dry that I'm gonna put up over this guy so that we can continue on with our painting. All those edges down. Feel free to take your time on this. Come back to it. All right, so now I'm ready to go back and add inside here. So I'm gonna go to the back of that paintbrush, and looks like there are some darks. I think I'll add a next lightest dark here. I'm gonna try and make it bigger. And of course, you can always fill that more circular with your paintbrush. If you look close at our original one, they're not perfect circles. They're not perfectly in the center of each dot, each circle. It's okay. Let it be. Let it be a little more free. I'm gonna wipe that off and go to a new one. This time, maybe I'll put a light in it. But once again, I'm gonna try and make it go a little bigger. That's gonna work for me. You could layer each circle as many times as you want. usually do this painting with multiple size of daubers. We have like 5 different size daubers. Sometimes we have to improvise. Come back through with that paintbrush. Now, once again, you would still want all these layers to dry before you go and put your next layer on. So this painting can get a little time consuming when you're waiting for all of that to dry. There's all my medium dots in. I think I'll go to my smaller dots. This guy is still pretty covered in black, so I'm gonna try and use my water to really rinse it out since black does take over. And then take it to your towel or paper towels, whatever you're using. This paint will stain, so you might want to use paper towels if you don't have painting towels like I do. All right, where can I add some more things? You can see mine's not dry, so it's kind of mixing. It's okay though. I want to keep going for you. I think I've got one up there. I could put. And then I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna switch to the back of this paintbrush and add even more. There's no right or wrong on how many layers you add to all of this. So you could keep going for a while. To get an extremely small dot, you're either going to use a Q-tip or a small paintbrush, whichever you happen to have handy. But then you can really come back through once you've layered it enough and give it the final dots as needed. You can also use the back of your paintbrush, kind of experiment, see what you like. We still have our small dots to fill in with. The idea that you want with these is to create a visual movement. So your eye is going to follow because these dots may start out slightly bigger and get smaller, and they're going to be close together. So your eye sees it as movement and they'll follow these lines. But it's done the exact same way as we have done our big dots. Except that it's gonna be done with your paintbrush. So you decide where you wanna start. Like maybe I'll start over here, and I'm gonna start with a bigger circle, and it's going to start to get smaller as it travels. And we will come back through and layer those as well. Then I'll look somewhere else. And maybe down here, I'll add some movement. But it might be not dark enough to be different on that background right there. So I went a little darker, there we go. You do not have to stay with the circle. If you want that line to just travel somewhere, make it travel. But try and make it get smaller as it travels. Switching colors, I'll add some movement with my regular blue. I think I could get carried away with the eye traveling. But at this point, it's time for you to just keep adding those dots, fill it in slowly, let each layer dry, and then come back through with your paintbrush and add your next layers. Hopefully you've enjoyed our painting. I know you still have a while to go. Take your time, enjoy the process, and have some fun. Thanks for joining.